Can I be honest? I hate speech tournaments. I woke up at 4:30 for this. Now, don't get me wrong, I love performing and I love my teammates. I even love my judges. I sure wish there were one here now. But let's be honest, every tournament is the same with you guys. After every round, one of you will come back to the table and say that your last judge hated you, or the girl with the lazy eye from Belvedere kept giving you the stink eye, singular. So you know that you got last in your round, and that's why you hate speech. But I know you guys. You don't hate speech. You love it. Why else would you give up each and every Saturday for nearly 3 months? But we can never just admit that. We can never just say, I love speech, I love my team, I love my pros. Instead, we meet back at the table after rounds and focus exclusively on the negative. And we're not alone. According to a 2022 ABC article, 71% of people are dissatisfied with where they are in their life, and they're not afraid to share it. Now, if you're the lazy-eyed girl, I get it. But the rest of us, you could have 5 good things happen to you and 1 bad thing of the same magnitude, and you'll focus on the bad more than the good. This is called negativity bias. And not only is it annoying, it affects everyone, but especially teenagers such as us. So that's why our speech coach asked me to talk to you today at this team meeting about the need to lose our negativity bias and move forward. Coach Smith was going to give this presentation, but the majority of you annoy the hell out of him. So he asked me to do it instead. So today, let's call out an SOS to find the causes behind our negativity bias, radio our friends with the effects, before finally becoming positivity pros with the solutions. How's that for a cutesy preview? So where does negativity bias stem from? Well, according to the Decision Lab, it's certainly not a new phenomenon. Back when people had things to actually worry about, such as avoiding Paleozoic predators with their prehistoric pals Thag and Krug and Joe Biden, it was natural to fear the worst. As our ancestors were continually being exposed to environmental threats, they developed negativity bias to survive. And now we do the same thing, but we're not scared of predators. We're just scared of that judge who only writes, "Good job," and then gives you the 6. Additionally, not only did we inherit this disposition, but the influence from the media certainly doesn't help. I scroll through TikTok for hours daily rather than listening to my teachers, parents, or parole officer. But what I've noticed is that the majority of the content I watch is inherently negative, and the news is no better. How in the hell do people watch the news? I'm convinced that people watching the news are either masochists, annoying extem kids, or people who are already clinically depressed and figure, what the hell? Every story's the same. Breaking news, hurricane ravages Florida, or the death count mounts in the Middle East, or another cabinet member accused of sexual assault. It's really sad when every advisor a president has isn't allowed within 100 yards of a public school, but that's just what our news media tells us. No one here knows who won the Nobel Peace Prize, but we all know how many bottles of baby oil they found at Diddy's. The news media has figured out that to keep people watching the 24-hour news cycle, it needs to be negative, to give the watchers or listeners that dopamine our little unevolved primate brains crave. So now that we have explored the causes behind negativity bias, let's look at how it affects us. The main issue that negativity bias causes is mental health problems. According to the CDC, people who suffer a great deal of negativity bias are more likely to face anxiety and depression. Way to state the obvious, CDC. So if we focus on the negative all the time, we just might get depressed? Big shock. Next thing you know, they'll release a report that shows a correlation between premature blindness and people who poke themselves in the eye with a really sharp stick. Additionally, according to Medium, we live in a cycle of eternal dissatisfaction. For example, if I'm having a bad day, I crave Chipotle to fill the void. So I go out and I buy a bowl with white rice, no beans, barbacoa, pico, green salsa, corn salsa, and cheese for $11.17. And I sometimes add guac for an additional $14 because I have no self-respect or awareness. Now, what I've noticed, that might satisfy my pregnancy-like cravings for now, but tomorrow I'm just gonna want it again and again and again. This can make us dependent on materialistic possession to find happiness instead of seeking happiness from within. And not only does negativity bias affect us individually, it also cripples our relationships. I haven't been in many relationships before, and my friends say it's because my standards are too high. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna date someone who came out the womb crying. You've been alive for 4 seconds and you're already needy? I'm good. According to Psychology Today, people focus on negative stimuli in their partners 5 times more than they focus on positive stimuli. This explains why no matter how many times you take them to Applebee's, if you suggest taking them to Burger King for Valentine's Day 1 time, you'll never hear the end of it. Honey, I was totally joking. All right, you got me. I just really wanted a Whopper. So obviously negativity bias has some significant consequences, but is there anything we can do about it? Sadly, no. So go practice your DI. But that wouldn't be very speechy, would it? So let's talk solutions. First, we need to address our social media usage. I know as much as the next guy how fun doom scrolling can be, but it can lead us down the path of destruction. I, for one, never thought that watching 1 episode of The Backyardigans would send me down a rabbit hole of kinky fan fiction, but 16 hours later, I know all about the sex life of Uniqua and Pablo. I don't think I'll ever recover from that. I'm not saying that you have to unfollow your entire TikTok feed, but try and mix it up a bit. And instead of only listening to podcasts that focus on the negatives like America Under Siege or The Melting of the Planet or Bear Down Chicago Bears, we need to listen to podcasts that make us happy and not want to stab ourselves with a dirty syringe. So first, avoid anything related to Chicago sports and perhaps turn to Pinterest instead. No one's depressed on Pinterest. Plus, they have great recipes for a 7-layer salad. More importantly, we need to acknowledge our own biases. According to the National Institute of Health from February 1st, 2023, we need to be honest with ourselves. Having a negative bias is not always a bad thing. It's what you do with that bias. If the bias gets you to work harder, then great. If the bias causes you to curl into a ball and recite your intro over and over again, not so good. Finally, we can't just address these biases. We need to work on getting rid of them. It's like saying, I need to memorize my OC. But rather than sitting down and doing it, we grab a bowl of Cheez-Its and binge watch 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. I'm looking at you, Cormac. When we can identify that we have a negative bias, we can take a step back and realize that it doesn't mean that we are doomed for negative outcomes. Except for you, Cormac. Enjoy the end of Game of Thrones. I bet your favorite character dies. So today, we have talked about negativity bias, explored the causes, realized the effects, before finally coming up with some solutions on how we can live better lives. So let's take a new attitude into this Saturday, team. We don't need to be mopey after every round. Enjoy the performances, enjoy your teammates, and if nothing else, just be happy that you aren't Cormac.